Hello, Superior family. Have you missed us? Welcome back to another Coffees and Conversations. I am everyone's favorite business development associate, Miss Leah Lawrence, joined by my hostess with the mostest, everyone's favorite clinical research coordinator, Miss Brianna White. Brianna, how you doing?
I'm here, Leah. I'm here. Excited to be here for yet another Coffees and Conversations, and super excited to touch on the topic that we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, and the topic is concerning around maternal health. Now, before we get started, this is the month of May. So, just wishing a happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers watching, all of the mother figures, everyone who's been aunties count too, because sometimes aunties play a major, major role. Grandmamas, all of you guys, happy belated Mother's Day. And my mom's birthday happened to fall on Mother's Day. So, shout out to so she got a double whammy. So welcome once again. And we just wanted to talk about what's really going on and what comes into care for women, specifically women of color, and especially Black and Brown mothers, and why it's time that we stop tiptoeing around the real issues. Like, how does medical bias quietly show up in maternal care? And how can research help and call it out? What would maternal care look like if it were actually designed for women of color or with more women in mind? Or how can we move beyond just awareness and start putting some of those things into action? So, this isn't just going to be about statistics today, guys. It's going to be about stories and about systems and about survival, because that is something that does need to be said. This comes in terms of survival, because women's mortality rates in terms of the birthing bed, it is not getting better. And we do need to talk about it. So we need to get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee or something warm or some water, and let's talk honestly, and let's imagine what maternal care should look like and how research can be a part of the solution. And as always, if you guys want, drop all of your thoughts and comments into the comment section, and we will get to it as we are going along. Share your experience with us, or you can even just listen in. However, it is that you're showing up, we're glad to have you here. And so we're just going to get into it. Brianna, how does medical bias quietly show up in maternal care, and how can research help to call it out?
Yeah, so I think before I even get into that question, like I love the intro and how you even came into this. I'm excited to talk about this topic because I am a soon to be mom. So this is something that like this is something that is so key and so important, especially as I will be navigating my first time as being a mom. And these are things that I think I've had awareness of, but it's different when like you're now in the position of having to actively think about these things because now they could potentially impact you, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, so I guess going in with your first question of just like how does medical bias quietly show up in maternal care? One of the biggest things that I have always known and realized, especially for a lot of women of color, is that when it comes to maternal care and medical bias, there's always this belief um, that we take pain better than other individuals and our white female counterparts, right? So there's a lot of dismissal of our pain and of our symptoms when we talk about going through things as moms. And so when we report issues as relates to pain or concerns, especially during pregnancy and even after in postpartum, it's often minimized or even ignored by providers, which is something that bothers me and why I feel like it's so important, especially being in the space of research and in medicine as a whole, to have awareness of these things so that when I see them, I can point them out.
Mhm.
So I would definitely say that's one. Another thing that I've always seen is a delay in diagnosing women of color or also misdiagnosing women, right? So again, you're seeing slower responses in conditions like preeclampsia, which is a huge thing in pregnancy when we're talking about blood pressures and ignoring those things and ignoring those symptoms as well as a lot of women of color have to deal with postpartum hemorrhage. So if we dismiss their pain and their symptoms, then we see these delays and these misdiagnoses, and as a result, we see that we're having worse outcomes as it relates to our pregnancy and just postpartum care. So those are definitely a few or a couple. I think there are like a few more, but I think where the research comes in, right, is we always talk about an inclusive approach to research in terms of making sure that we include diverse people in our participant pool, but also in places of research as doctors, as providers, as coordinators, as site staff from the sponsor CRO perspective. And what that's going to do is help to kind of uncover these disparities, highlight these patterns of bias, bring them to the forefront, and then be able to kind of build evidence that can drive a lot of policy changes that need to happen, help providers be better trained on how to see these things and not to dismiss the pain or symptoms, so that we can have a more patient-centered care from the research side to the medical side. So that was a mouthful, but
No, but that was a good wealth of information. And
yeah.
also, like, I, not that I completely forgot, but like, no, we're talking about maternal health and Brianna's going through her first baby. Oh my goodness. Like, yeah, let me talk about that a little bit. I don't know how that like complete. Ooh, ADD, ADHD, y'all.
You're fine.
Okay, let me just segue a little bit to it. What sort of type of things did you think your pregnancy was going to be before you were pregnant that you wish somebody probably told you versus like now that you're pregnant and you've been ready to go? Like it was like, oh, this is not what I expected. I thought it was going to be something completely.
Yeah, well, I think this might come up later too. Like for me in pregnancy, one, we talk about like the use of media, and I know like media can be a great thing to bring information and awareness, but sometimes media, social media, and how it is that we put information out can also cause a level of trauma or try to traumatize women into thinking that their pregnancy experience will look the same as others. For myself, I think I went into it expecting certain things to happen, expecting to have morning sickness, expecting to have low energy, to be tired, to be all of these things that they talk about in pregnancy, to expect. And quite frankly, for my experience, I actually didn't experience a lot of those things. So I didn't have, and I haven't had any morning sickness. I haven't had, any kind of extreme things that sometimes they talk about, and I think there is that level of awareness, but also too, just having to make sure that we understand that every woman's experience will be different. So don't go into your experience thinking that it's going to be the exact same. Like at this point, at week so and so, I'm going to start to experience, what's the word? What was pregnancy brain. That's one thing that I will say from my experience. I do have pregnancy brain, but going thinking like, oh, I'm just going to be sick all the time, be low energy. I won't be able to work. I won't be able to do all of these things. So I kind of went in kind of thinking some of those things and thinking I would be handicapped by certain things based off of what was presented to me about pregnancy. But now that I am going through that experience, realizing that for me, I've had a totally different experience of having what I consider a healthy pregnancy with very little to no complications, not, having to be necessarily concerned about, blood pressure or sickness or all of these things. So I think it's good to provide a level of awareness, but also to just also know that your experience can be very different from somebody else's, and don't take all of these things as it will for sure happen to you.
Got you, got
Yeah.
you. Because I thought the morning sickness thing would have sure happened to everyone. I thought that was
No,
universally. And now you're like, you don't have, okay, it might be hope. In a few years.
no, and I think too, like, it's so funny because like before I even had children, like, I mean, I would talk to my mom and my
Mhm.
grandmas about like their experience, but it's different when you're kind of going through that process. So now, like going through pregnancy, I learned a lot of things in terms of like my paternal grandmother didn't experience any morning sickness herself, and she had
Mhm.
six children, right? So I think it also goes back. I think it goes back to, you have to think about your genetics. You have to think about who it is that you're tied to. And there's so many factors that go into what your experience can be like coming into motherhood. So, yeah.
I'm trying to remember the stories my mom told me about me because my mom had me real late. It was I
Mhm.
have like a almost 10 years gap between me and my older siblings. So she had me well into her 30s. And she was
Yeah.
girl, all I told him was y'all gonna tie my tubes before I leave here. I was like, dang mom. Okay. So now everything that being pregnant, things of that nature, how would you uh design maternal care? How would it look like? How best do you think it should look like if it was designed by a woman of color or someone actually pregnant who knows exactly what it is that maternal care should need?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I would do and design as a woman of color going through this for the first time, and just some of the experiences and things just that I know, like definitely we talk about that level of having culturally competent care. We talked already about some of the biases that kind of show up when you don't have culturally competent care. Um, and one thing that is important to me being a person of color is going to appointments and doing things as it relates to my child is feeling like I have providers and I have people in my space that I feel like understand me as a person, who see me as an individual, and don't just look at me as like, all right, you're a 10:30 appointment that I have. I need to check off all of these things on a box. So I think that's part of it. That's one thing I would definitely make sure is in the design process of culturally competent care. Making sure you understand and respect cultural values of your people, communication styles,
Mhm.
um, traditions. All of those things are so important. I think having community led support, that's another big one, is the importance of community as it relates to coming into motherhood and even afterwards. So one thing that I've been able to talk and a lot with our research director and even beyond before I even was pregnant, even now, is like some of the importance of other care physicians or care providers that I think it's becoming more of a bigger thing in terms of utilizing doulas and midwives, and how other community collaborations make the experience of motherhood for women, right? So it's not just your physician, but there are also, women who rely on other resources related to community to support them through being able to safely bring a child into the world, and even take care of them afterwards. So
Mhm.
that would be another one for me. And then again, I think this even just relates to research in itself. It's just like that holistic, whole person approach where I'm not just focusing on growing baby, but I'm thinking about mom's mental health. I'm thinking about mom's nutrition. I'm making sure she has a level of social support. I make sure I have resources in terms of if she's unfortunately going through a situation where she's dealing with some sort of trauma that could be affecting um, her while she's in pregnancy. So I think those are a lot of the things that I would make sure is in the design. Is we have to look at all the aspects and realize there's a level of intersectionality that affects that whole entire experience for mom and baby. So
Yes. Aw, yes, yes. Those were actually perfect things. I can think of like why isn't more of that centered around that, but most definitely. And it takes a village to raise a child. And I thank God every day for my village. It got me through college.
yeah.
It does. It does. And I just remember when my sister-in-law gave birth, how we all just came together. Like we were all there at the hospital. When she came home, my mom like cooked them like a week's worth of meals, and like I was on like diaper duty, and she just slept the first few days. And like she just thank you. Like so she just hugged us close and like thank you. I was like, oh, it's not that
Yeah.
diapers. But then like it does take it plays a role into it when a mother is around the community or her village and she's like, okay, I can sleep and I can trust my child and I can trust everyone is okay and like I can trust and like be vulnerable and get back to me. And
Absolutely. I agree. And I think too, especially for first time moms or like your mom, if it's been 10 years since she's had another child, like there's so many things I feel like going into this that I knew, but there was a lot of things I didn't know, right? Or I had an idea, like I knew I needed certain things, but not necessarily how, the process of getting it or certain things. So I think that level of community support is so important, and just knowing what resources you have available. I think about like, after you have a child, you gotta they need to see their pediatrician, but at what point do you start contacting your pediatrician?
Mm.
You know that your child will need a car seat, but there are certain things in terms of you have to make sure that it meets a certain level of safety. And are we making sure that we set up this car seat in a way to make sure that it is properly installed in the car and all of these things. So there's so many little small things that you need for your child, or you understand like you have to feed them, but how do you know when to feed them? Or how do you know when you're going through postpartum, and you
Mm.
maybe experience something that's affecting your mental health, and maybe at that time you don't realize it. So I think there's so many little pieces that having resources and having that community centered care, whether it comes through a physician, another resource in community, family, whatever it is, that has to be there and present, especially for first time moms or moms that it's been a while. I forgot about all of these things, or things have changed.
Like
Like,
both of my kids are up, running around, talking. They're going to the bathroom by themselves. They're in school. Like
yeah.
I messed the whole family up. Not messed like, but I shut the tables. One thing I will say is just like you said, but make it so mothers can ask these questions, because a lot of
Yeah.
times they feel like it's going to be a dumb question, or oh, I should know this, or because if you have children in your family, like a lot of things you mentioned, like I was there when my nieces were, they're still babies and things of that nature, but I don't know any of those questions, and I've been around
Mhm.
them. Like one question, when do you start brushing your baby's teeth until they actually get teeth?
Ah,
Brush the gums. Like I don't know.
yeah.
When do we start doing oral health care on kids? I don't know when this
Exactly.
happens.
Exactly. My baby actually has her little oral gum cleaner already.
See, that's like, do you wait till they grow teeth to brush their teeth, or do you just like, I don't know, because that was never one of
Brush
my
those
class
gums, right?
notes. So that's definitely a thing. Okay, okay. And now, how do you believe that clinical research can fix the trust gap when it comes to Black and Brown mothers? Because I read this quote, or I heard this quote one day, and so I could have
Mhm.
sent one, but it was titled, and it hit me because I didn't realize, like, oh, it might have some truth to it. So it says, "What cops are to Black women is sometimes the same as doctors are to Black women."
Mm.
And I said, I know so many Black women who I've either talked to or have, they feel that exact same sentiment.
Yeah.
And so, how do you believe we can fix this trust gap where it's less like, because even I do have my own gap between doctors because I have my own experience with my former OBGYN. So I was like, that's why that quote hit me. And I didn't even realize, like, oh, wow, this is serious.
Yeah. That's a really great and I've actually heard that quote too, and I'm like, yeah. Um but I think it goes back to one of the things that we talked about earlier, was we talk about prioritizing representation, right? I need to see Black and brown doctors that are in or at my location, and it should be a thing where I can see them, I can talk to them. They have a level of understanding of my experience and what it looks like to be a Black or a brown person. Um, so I think it's that. I think it is also to, realizing that sometimes you won't always necessarily have a Black or brown doctor, but feeling that my doctor understands my experience and has taken the time to understand what my experience could be as a Black or brown person. I think even if you're not Black, or I say Black or brown, but if you're not a doctor of color, you're a white doctor, whatever the case is, I think that level of listening is something that's important. Recognizing that there are certain differences in the way that we go through and experience pregnancy and motherhood that are going to be different, and that is okay, and that your responsibility should be, I need to hear my patient. Um, so I think there's that. So having a level of representation. I think another big one, and I always think about this even as it relates to research, is just acknowledging that there is some historical harm. Like, I think that is one of the greatest ways to build trust and transparency with people, is acknowledging and being transparent and saying, I understand where you're coming from because I know that from the past there were medical injustices and things that happened where people in your position were not protected, they were not looked after or cared in the way that they should have, and that goes a long way for a person to say, "Huh, like you actually get it, right?" Because a
Mhm.
lot of times we just want to feel that people understand our perspective, we understand what we're going through, and we're not being dismissed. Um, so I think there's that. And I think another thing that we can do is just making sure that we build research around like the lived experiences of people. So, including questions, outcomes, and even when we talk about research, our study goals, they should reflect the realities that Black and Brown mothers face, right? Not just looking at clinical symptoms, but being able to understand their quality of life and also, too, like their lived experience as you know, um, just where it is that they come from. So, yeah, those are a few.
Those are really, really good ones. One of mine would definitely be treat your participants, or if you call them patients, as if they're a part of your family. Don't prescribe them something that you wouldn't prescribe to your mom. Don't
Yeah,
prescribe them something that you wouldn't prescribe to your kid. Don't give them advice that you wouldn't give your own family members just simply because they are of a different skin tone, or it might be previous statistics that say, oh, Black women are stronger and things of that nature. Listen, that strong Black woman trope is what's going to kill half of Black women before it saves them. Like
right.
those statistics aren't your patient. It's this person in front of you. And if
Yeah,
you're talking to them and if you're getting to know them enough and if they're coming in there, because I'll case in point, one of the earlier doctors I had before I moved out the house, and I wish I still had Miss Rhonda, she was a white woman. And we were discussing birth control. And she's like, no, I'm not, I didn't put my daughter on that. Like we were going through the list and she's like, no, because I told my daughter, and like just how she was saying it. And even though like we was talking about, even though she was like, no, I don't want you to get on that because I didn't even want my daughter. Just that alone. And it was so completely unconscious. I was like, okay, whatever she tell me to get on, I'm gonna get on. It was that
yeah,
like that's the decision I made right there in the chair. Whatever she tells me to get on, I'm gonna get on. Simply because she already knew about that and I didn't even know nothing about it. She didn't tell me. She's like, nope, because I wouldn't put my daughter on it. And as a
yeah.
doctor, for me to hear that and to know that the same care that you would take for your daughter, you would take for mine. I mean, you would take for
For
me.
me, yeah.
I'm cool. And I was so upset when I had to leave her when I moved to DC. I was so upset. And she wasn't a woman of color. It was simply just the fact that she was going to give me the same care that she gave her daughter because like, that's how I knew this is my doctor. And so
Yeah.
I feel like that's a way to close the gap, give them the same exact care.
Yeah. I love that too because I think it goes back to like they're not looking at you at just as just like a
Mm-hmm.
patient that I need to get in and out and I just need to put her on something, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I see you as someone that I care about, that I value, that if I wouldn't do this to somebody in my family, why would I do that to you? So
Yeah, because
absolutely.
the age old saying treat others how you would want to be treated, especially if you're, a medical professional and these person are coming to you about their health. That's the least you can do, especially because the copays ain't gonna be a joke. Okay, so to move on and to be real and how we can shift from awareness to accountability in women's health. So we've talked about all the things that need to be done, but how can we
Mhm.
actually like put this into action?
Um, I think one of the biggest things, and this really goes with anything when when you're finally talking about being accountable for things, is the importance of being able like to track what it is that you're doing, like track my outcomes, not just like my intention was this. Well, it's like, okay, your intention might have been that, but like, what is the results? Where's the proof to show that this is working and that, your intention is well. So I think it goes beyond just like the campaigning, but really measuring the real progress in terms of access to care, in terms of treatment equity for people of color, in terms of how the health outcomes look for women. And so realizing, okay, this is my intention, this is the desire. How do I measure this? And now that I know how to measure this, what is the results? And I think that's something that keeps you accountable because then you can see, okay, this is working, this is not working. How do we make a shift, or how do we make it so that we're actually seeing measurable results that shows that yeah, like this actually works. So I think there's that. I think there's the importance of making sure that we actually are funding solutions that are led by women. So if it's investing in research, investing in care models, investing in actual policy initiatives that are driven by women and specifically women of color, so that we can make sure that our lived experiences are at the table. So we have to be a part of it. We need to track those outcomes, and then ultimately is we have to be people that actually hold the systems that are responsible for all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
hold them accountable, right? So we have to demand a level of accountability from them, because we can complain and talk about these things all the time, but we're not going to the policymakers, if we're not going to the healthcare institutions, if we're not reporting these grievances, if we're not, talking about these things to the right people, is just kind of like one of those things where you're complaining, but it's not in the right hands of the people who it needs to really drive the results that we want to see.
Got you. That's really, really good because we do need to know, like, okay, how would this affect? How would this affect this market? How would this affect this? And so we can know, and so we can be like, okay, this doesn't work. So now let's go about it this way. Okay. And
Yeah.
so, what specific data would you say needs to be collected that could be saving women's lives?
Yeah. So, one thing I definitely know that we can do better in terms of things is, a lot of times, and there's, we have more of a push with FDA and other things, especially as it relates to research, to making sure that we have more people of color present in research, but being able to actually disaggregate the data to look at race and gender, and help us to better understand how these disparities affect how we got better kind of healthcare interventions, right? So really breaking the data down to look at race specifically, gender specifically, and see those outcomes. So just taking the time to thoroughly review the data and really break it down piece by piece, so we can say like, okay, we of course we now have more people, more African Americans or more so and so present in these studies, but we need to break this down by race to see, well, what do we see specifically as it relates to African American women age this group to this group, or whatever the case is. So that's one thing. I think another big one that is talked about a lot, but definitely there's always work that can be done, is talking about maternal health after delivery. So with going through pregnancy now, I know one of the biggest things is, and I've seen this as a lot, it's like, okay, you have that one postpartum visit 6 weeks after you have baby. But after that, there's typically no other postpartum visit to follow up or check on mom after those 6 weeks. And newsflash, like 6 weeks is nothing compared to the amount of time that you're going to be spending with this child. And there's so many reports that say how long it takes for mom's mental health state to get back to what it was pre-pregnancy, what it is for their bodies to heal and get back to what it was pre-pregnancy. And we're talking about a couple years to 6 years. And so the fact that we only have that 1 6 week follow-up visit means that we are missing a lot of data in terms of how it is that coming into this newfound place affects hormones, how it affects mental health, how it affects our bodies. And as a result, we're missing key things as it relates to mental health, cardiovascular issues, and complications. Even in terms of a lot of moms having issues with high blood pressure after delivering, right? So, like, we look at it in pregnancy, they pay attention then, but then afterwards, there's a lot of things that can, show that I think it's called eclampsia. I have to go back and check, but just experiencing high blood pressure after pregnancy. They're like, okay, we're trying to get the baby delivered and safe, but we need to follow up on these things afterward. So,
even the hair loss. And it might not seem like a lot, but who wants to be losing their hair and breastfeeding and a baby and all of this other stuff? Like, that's a lot. And I didn't even realize that happens.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
just the one postpartum? Just one?
One. Yeah.
That's insane. I was
There's
gonna
so
say
many things, right? There's so many things, like,
because the baby gets so many checkups. Wait, that's how you go. Like, it's not just about, like, yes, the baby is very, very important, but mom is too. And I'm thinking about all of the times my nieces had checkups, like after they were born, versus my sister-in-law. It's like, yeah, she really only time she's going to the doctor was for the baby's checkup.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
So, yep. So I agree with you there.
Yeah. Well, not, my next question is going to be what part of maternal health journey do we never talk about but desperately need to? Yes, we need to talk on mama postpartum.
That first year for sure. And I think we talked about all the things already, but the mental load that year after, not just 6 weeks, even kind of some of the side effects in terms of like epidurals and things of that nature and how that affects mom after the fact. I don't know if we do a lot of as much work as we can in that. The impact of birth trauma, and that's another thing is actually going through the birthing process, and there can be a lot of trauma in delivery and how that affects a woman, her body, her image, all of those things. How we navigate stress, how we just look at a mom's mental load. Like, yeah, there's so many, I mean, there's so many things, even in terms of, miscarriages and stillbirths and infant loss afterwards. So some of those topics that are a little bit more taboo in terms of pregnancy, but all of those things I think are things that we don't talk about enough. And they need to be talked about more.
Yes, 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 yes. Aw. Okay, well, to make it on a lighter, we're going to leave everyone on a brighter note. In a perfect world, what would the informed consent in maternal care truly look like?
Well, I love this. Okay, so one, we need to make sure that language is clear and accessible. So, for me, I feel like my experience with pregnancy has been well, and there's many things like I have talked about with my doctor. And to be honest, because I come from a medical and research space, there have been times where they said certain things, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, like because I'm used to the terminology, but there's a lot of things where I can imagine like someone who's not been in this space, and you're just throwing out acronyms or saying certain things, but not truly explaining them. Um, that can make a difference in terms of what they understand. Like I mean, I literally think about going. I had a doctor's appointment literally 2 days ago, and my doctor was like, "Yeah, so you're here for you're doing a I think she said it was like a PPD or a PDD ultrasound. Have you had that done before?" And I was like, I don't think so.
Like,
And I
that's
was like, and I was asking, I was like, explain what that is, because they just, write things and do things, and sometimes they don't always do the best job of explaining. Like, okay, at this point, this happens, and this is what this means, and this is what we're checking for. And luckily for me, as they're doing it, it's like, okay, well, I can really kind of catch on to things, kind of know it and feel comfortable. But for somebody who's not used to that, like I'm sure they're probably just sitting there like, okay, they're just kind of waiting for you to lead them to the next point, but not so much ask a question or, have a level of understanding to piece things together. So there's that. Making sure that women feel that they have real choices and not pressure. So again, especially with the labor and delivery, there's so many interventions involved. Knowing when if it's necessary to utilize those interventions, allowing mom to make those decisions. And so I think that's a big thing is respecting mom's choice, especially as it relates to birthing plans and going through the laboring process. Asking questions, making sure that you create space for a good dialogue and encourage patients to really voice their concerns and fully understand their options as they exist. And just making sure that the consent process is ongoing, right? So we talk about this in research, but just making sure it's an ongoing conversation as it relates to pregnancy, postpartum, and birthing. And I think a biggest part is just making sure that you respect the voice of the mom. If a patient or the mom says no to something, we need to be like, okay, unless this is a life or death situation and you are literally trying to save this person's life, and you have to, we need to make sure that we're respecting their no's, um, and honoring their decisions that they choose to make as it relates to their bodies and their lived experience. So that's those are some things I think for sure.
That's perfect. And then, of course, allow mom to ask as many questions as she possibly can. And don't wait for her to ask the question, because a lot of times we won't. A lot of times you ask somebody, you got any questions? No. Even though they got like 10 or 20 or 30 in their head, they're not going to ask. So sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, do a different segue to be like, oh, well, is there anything else that's really concerning to you that you would like me to answer while we're here right now? Like, just phrase it differently. Because lots of times,
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, you ask people if you have any other questions just so they can get out of there, they're going to say no. So just open up that,
Yeah.
leave that door open. And lots of people do have this common thing that people in the medical industry are very condescending, or they talk down to us, or they have God
Yeah.
and things of that nature. And I could say for me, I've experienced that a lot. And especially in like the person of color community, that is something that has been a common thing that's just been an annoyance and an ick, and reason why people don't go to the doctors. So I would definitely say, definitely do everything that Brianna has told you to do, but leave that space open at the end for them to really just, whatever is burning up in their head, they can just unburden themselves and ask you. And I promise you that trust, the first building blocks of it, will really be there and be cemented, and you will be on your way to a good, healthy relationship.
Yeah. I love that.
This is a really good conversation. This was
What?
really good. I had fun. Well, everyone, thank you. Do we have any comments?
I don't think so. I don't see any comments right now.
Okay. So thank you guys so much for tuning into another Coffees and Conversations. It has been a pleasure as always. If you have not gone onto our page and did the poll to see what you wanted for the summer of Superior, please do so. These Coffees and Conversations have been so much fun, and they're going to be even better. This is going on our second year. We're going on a year of doing
Yeah.
Coffees and Conversations. This is amazing. But are the new topics for the summer, they are out on our profile. So please go ahead and take a pic, and so we can let you know how fun the Superior Summer is going to be. Brianna?
All right. I don't think I have any last minute words other than just super excited to do another Coffees and Conversations. I just enjoy this kind of laid back conversational approach to talking about research and medicine and these important health topics. So just happy to do this once again.
All right, guys, be easy. Have a good Friday. Bye.
Bye.